All right, well, welcome everyone. Today's webinar is a repeat of our last webinar, but we had such incredible demand that we thought we'd do it again. So if you saw it previously, just be aware that it will be the same content, but you will also have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So if you had questions from last time that you didn't get out or that you thought of since then, it might be worth it to stick around. Or if you just wanted to see it again for fun, that's great too. But what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at what's new in Tableau 10.2. So Tableau 10.2 has been out for a few weeks now, almost a month, and I've enjoyed using it a lot. There are a lot of new features that are making life a lot easier. Tableau was already fun to work with, but it's even more fun with some of these new features, and we'll get into that. And something that we didn't do last time, we'll take a look at Tableau 10.3, which is now in beta. I'll show you one of my favorite new features there, and I'm having fun starting to explore that as well. But Tableau 10.2 is in production, so we'll spend most of our time there today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Most of you know me, and that's great, so I won't spend a lot of time. But I am a principal consultant at Teknion Data Solutions, which is a Tableau Gold partner, and in fact, Teknion was named Tableau Partner of the Year for services and training for 2016. So we're excited about that. And if you have any data needs, whether it's visualization with Tableau, analysis, data modeling, ETL, and you think you could use the help of a consulting company, I strongly recommend Teknion. I love working here. I've been here 12 years now, almost 13, and it is a great place to work, and I love helping clients with their data. I am a Tableau Zen Master. I've been named a Tableau Zen Master 3 years in a row now, which is an incredible honor, and I'm deeply humbled to have been named a Zen Master. There are about 20, I think it's 25, 27 Zen Masters in the world this year, and it's an incredible group of people. It's an incredible honor to be named among them. I'm also the author of Learning Tableau, which is now in its second edition. So if you're looking for a book that would help you learn Tableau, the foundational concepts, and then building upon those to more advanced concepts, you might check that out. I'd love that. Most of you know I like science fiction, so Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, anything that has star in the title, probably I like it. I do have an incredible wife. I have 3 children, and then I also have a 100-pound yellow lab named Moose. He's supposed to be 80 pounds, but with 3 children who feed him whatever he wants, he's a little bit overweight. My all-time favorite feature, well, I have lots of favorite features in Tableau 10.2, but this one is the one that is really saving my life. Previously in Tableau, we did not have autosave, so I got in the habit of hitting Control-S all the time, or hitting save from the file menu, especially if I was working with a client and they were kind of nervous about it. It's still a good habit, but now I don't have to worry about it as much. If I'm working with Tableau and my computer crashes or someone trips over the power cord, I have a lot more confidence that when I go back to Tableau and open it up, I will have an auto-saved version. In fact, just the other day I was working with some financial reports in Tableau, something that my boss really wanted to make sure that I had. I spent a lot of time on them, and then it crashed. But when I open it again, there it is. And I can see when it was last modified. I can see the versions. If there are multiple workbooks that I had open when things went down, I would see all of them. And I have the option to either open it, open that version, and then I can save it either on top of the original or as a new version. I can delete it if I think, well, I've got what I really need. I didn't make that many changes. I can do that, or I can just cancel out of this dialog box and think about it later, which is what I'm going to do right now. So that's kind of my all-time favorite feature of Tableau, except there's one other feature that is competing with that one that I have found in Tableau 10.2, and that is the ability to connect to spatial files. So every new version, Tableau continues to introduce new data connectors, new connectors to different databases, cloud data sources, flat files. I mean, you'll see JSON here. That's relatively new. Statistical files have been around for a little while, but every version introduces new ways of connecting to data, and spatial files are really neat because it opens up a lot of possibilities of what you can do with geospatial data. And so you might ask, what is a spatial file? Well, these are files that contain shapes. They contain polygons or shape files that you're going to put down on a map. So these are things like KML files. That's I think that's what Google Maps uses primarily as their standard, or Esri shape files. And then there are some other formats that I'm not quite as familiar with, but you may use those if you're using some sort of a GIS system. You may be familiar with these types of files. And the great thing is that I can connect to these files directly. So for example, here I have U.S. historical counties. These came from the Newberry Library. They put together a shape file of every county in the United States for the entire history of the United States. So we'll take a look at how that works, but I just select the file, and it connects directly to that file. And so your shapefile may have all kinds of data in it, from identifiers to labels, potentially dates. This file tells you when that particular county, when did the border start, when did they end, what was the change, what was the source of that data, and then even some other things like the area and whether it was a county or district. You get the full name. But then this last field here is the one that's really important for a shapefile, and that's the geometry field. That's the field that contains the entire definition of the shape itself, the polygon that's going to be drawn. Now, if you've ever worked with a polygon file and you've got that kind of file, you may be used to having one record for every point of that polygon, every vertex. But here, that entire polygon is contained in one field for the record. And that makes it really nice because when I go to actually use that, all I have to do is just double-click that geometry field, and Tableau automatically knows what to do with that. It takes that, it generates its latitude and longitude, and it's able to draw that geometry. And so here it's actually drawn it out, and if I bring in something like the ID, then it's going to separate it out into individual pieces, and I can see those different polygons as they're drawn here. And of course, this is historical data, so it's got every county for all time. So I might want to do something that allows me to filter. I've got a start date and an end date, and I could maybe filter on that, but then there would be some overlap. So instead, what I'll do is really quickly, I'll create a parameter that'll just let me select a date. I will make that a date, and actually I'm going to make it an integer. We'll just make it the year. And we'll say, to start with, let's see what the country looked like in 1776. And when we display it, just do 4 digits with no commas, no decimal points, so it looks like a year. and I'll give it a range here, everything from 1776 all the way to the year 2000. Say OK, and then I have to create a calculated field here so that I can use it as a filter. So what we'll do is we'll just say, is the year, is that on or after the start date, the year of the start date, and is it less than the year of the end date? And that'll work as a nice, nice date filter. So that I can look at these counties on a selected date. So we'll take that date filter, bring it up here and say only show me the ones where that's true. And here is what things look like in 1776. And if I show that parameter controlled, now I can control that year. So we can go up and look at what did the United States look like any given year. It's kind of interesting. In the early 1800s, the United States actually comprised part of Canada, which is interesting to me. But I look at this and I think, there's other aspects to the data that might be interesting to know. For example, which of these were parts of states? Which of these were simply territories at the time? Well, if I look at the data, I don't really have that in this data set. So one thing that Tableau allows me to do with a spatial file is, much like other data sources, I can actually do a cross-database join. So if I have data in other files or other databases, I can join that to my shapefile. And so I'll do that here. I'll edit the data source. And I actually have another data source. It's a really simple one, contained in, I believe it's a text file. We'll double check. Yes, it's a CSV file of states. So it just says, is it a state? And it's got the name of the state. Really, all it has are just the 50 states. So I'll open that up. And I can join it just like I would expect to be able to. I can do it here on this field, state territory, and here state territory. And when I do that, I'm going to get everything that matches. So Alaska is going to match with Alaska over here in my other file. I'll probably want to do a left join so that I keep all of the counties, regardless of whether they were contained in a state or a territory, because there are Alaska districts and territories. So I'll make it a left join. And at that point, I've got a nice data set that if I come back here, I can see whether something is a state or not simply by whether there is a value in that file. So did the left join find a match or not? If it found a state, then we get state. Otherwise, it's null, and I might edit the alias there. So instead of null, we know that that's a territory. So that's what the United States looked like in 1821. And again, I can look at any date to start to see that's interesting. Canada was a territory in Alaska was a territory in 1885. And I can start to see other things as well. So lots of different things that you can do with shapefiles. And you might think of more practical, more business examples, but if you have custom shapes that define sales territories or distribution territories, think of the analysis that you can start to do and the visualization that you can start to do to say, how many customers do we have in a certain distribution territory? How many potential customers do we have in a given sales territory? What's the market value of our custom territories? All kinds of things that you'll be able to do now simply with a shapefile. And you can generate those using geographic information systems. You can find them online, which is what I did here. There are all kinds of things that you can do and all kinds of ways that you can get that kind of data. And now Tableau has made it really easy to use that data and very easy to connect to that data. One little feature here that Tableau has added is something that I can access from the menu under Map and then Map Options, and it's here, the Map Scale. So this is maybe what you would consider just a little feature, but it's really nice because if I check that option, now I get a scale, and now the user of my visualization or dashboard can start to understand the context geographically of what they're looking at. So maybe not too hard when it's something that we're familiar with, the United States, but if I were to zoom in on a certain location, it is kind of nice to be able to see that scale update, and now I can see, okay, that's 20 miles here, or even a little bit closer. Now we're looking at a scale of about 5 miles. And so that's just a little feature. You'll start to see these little features pop up, things that maybe weren't even advertised by Tableau as new features, or things that you wouldn't necessarily see, but you'll start to see them as you're using Tableau 10.2, and that makes it a lot of fun. So I'll close out of this example, and we'll move on to another feature of Tableau 10.2, another new one. I'll open up just an example workbook here. What I'm going to look at next is the Python integration. And so even as I open up this workbook, it's warning me that there are some scripts that use an external service here. If I were to look at that, you'd see this is a Python script. We'll look at it more in detail, but of course I'm going to say yes, that's fine. But just in case there were any concerns about running scripts, that it will give you that warning. What Python allows you to do is to do all kinds of complex calculations and analysis that you might not be able to do in Tableau directly, or it might be very difficult to do in Tableau. So even things like cluster analysis, Tableau has some that's built in, but let's say that you wanted to do something a little bit different, use a different model, or use a different clustering technique. Well, you could do that in Python. And there are other things that you could do in Python as well, other statistical modeling, other data manipulation that you can do in Python that might be a little bit difficult to do with Tableau by itself. Now, here's an example of something that I want to be able to do. I've got a data source here of the top 100 science fiction books of all time. I don't remember where I got this list, or if it's or who put it together, but I see some of my favorites on this list, so yeah, it looks pretty valid to me. But what doesn't look great is the fact that all of these titles are lowercase. If I want to display these titles, I probably want to display them as title cased. Now I could think in Tableau I do have some abilities to create calculations, so I might take that title field and create a calculation, create a calculated field here to try to make it title case. And I do have some string functions that I can use, so I have things like upper, and we could take a look at that. So if I change that using upper, that gives me uppercase, but that's kind of loud to me when I look at that. And I could maybe get a little bit more complex, so I could say, well, let's just make the first character uppercased, and then everything else. So I've got a mid function. I can say let's do the title and start it at the second character. And that's okay. I mean, that gives me the first character uppercase and everything else lowercase, but it's still not really title case. And I could get really complex in Tableau and maybe try to break it apart using some split function, or maybe even use some regular expressions or something. But what I'm going to find is that calculation is going to get very complex, very difficult, and almost impossible. There are a lot of things that you can do with calculations in Tableau. They're very powerful, but every so often you'll hit something that isn't very easy to do. And this is one of those cases. So in this case, what I might do is turn to Python. And even back in Tableau 10.1, they had something called TabPi, which is a server that runs and allows you to use Tableau scripts directly from Tableau Desktop. So if you open up this web page, it's a GitHub web page where you can download it. This is maintained by Tableau. It still says beta. I think that was beta in 10.1, but I think with Tableau 10.2 it is a released product, so it is considered production now. I won't go through all of this, but this does describe how you can download the server, how you can set it up and configure it with Tableau Desktop, how you can configure it with Tableau Server. I went through these instructions. I did not find it very difficult at all to set up and to use. And when I did, now what I have is I have the ability to write calculated fields that use Python scripts right in the calculation. So if I look at this calculation here, which I've called title, you can see I've got a Python script that is written directly here. This is the very first Python script that I ever wrote. I am not a Python expert, but I'm learning. And in fact, I actually borrowed this from someplace online and then modified it slightly to make it work with Tableau. So even if you're not an expert with Python, it's not too difficult to start to figure it out. And I won't spend a lot of time going through all of the details here, but you can see the basic idea is that you're going to use one of these script functions, so something that starts with a script, and then based on the return type, you're going to have str for string or int for integer, or various suffixes here that will tell Tableau what kind of data you're expecting to get back. And then the first argument is the script itself, and the second is what you're going to pass into the script. So here I'm going to pass in the value of title, and that's going to come into the script and get run. And you can see the script basically just defines a set of exceptions of words that don't get capitalized. It defines a return list, which I'll explain the importance of that here in a little bit. And then for every title in this argument list, so arg1 is the first set of values that I'm passing in. And what happens is depending on how you've set up your calculation, you may be sending in one title at a time, multiple titles at a time. I'll explain how that works. But basically it's going to go through and find the title, and then for every word in that title, it's going to capitalize the first one always, and then for every other word, it's going to decide, is it an exception? Otherwise, capitalize that word, and then append it to the return list, and then finally return that return list. And you can see that if I use it, it works exactly the way I would expect it to. It capitalizes every word except for the exception words, and it's working fairly well. In fact, the last time I did this, I noticed this, rendezvous with Rama. With is capitalized, but it probably shouldn't be. It's just not here in my list of exceptions, but I can add it. And so right here at runtime, I can modify a Python script, hit apply, and it worked just fine. So Python right in Tableau, being executed at runtime, this is incredible and it's very powerful. So what I realized with using these Python scripts is that they are very powerful. They allow me to do a lot of things that I might not have been able to do as easily before. But I also realized something else. I realized I'm going to really have to pay attention to the fact that Tableau treats it as a table calculation, and you can see the little delta symbol on the field itself that indicates it is a table calculation. And that becomes important for a couple of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is to understand how it's actually passing in the values. So when I pass in title, what it ends up doing, especially since I've got this, this set up to compute using table down, is it's taking all of the titles within the partition, which in this case table down is the entire table. It's taking in all 100 titles and passing them all in as one list. That's why I went through each one by one. So for title in ARG1, we go through each title and do this. And I'm building a return list of 100 items so that it will match it back up at the end. So it only runs this script one time, and it runs it for all 100 titles. And in fact, what I can do is I can see that. What I can do is maybe something like this. So just so we can see it, I'll return the string of the length of arg1. And what I expect is when I do that and I hit apply, I see that it is 100 in length. So all 100 titles, and that's the length of that argument. So it's only running the script once and passing in all 100 titles. But if I were to change the way that this table calculation works, if I said compute using title, now what it's doing is it's for every title, but it's within the partition of rank, so it's only passing in one title, and it's running the script 100 times. And you can see the length is 1, and it does that one title, and then it runs it again. Length 1 runs the next title. Do you have to worry about this? No, not much, but it is something to be aware of because it could have performance impact. It could change the way that you write some of these scripts. So something to be aware of, and especially if there are certain things that you want to be able to do with some of these scripts in terms of looking at all 100 data elements and then doing some sort of statistical analysis or data modeling on those elements all at once. It does give you the ability to do that. So definitely something to be aware of, not something that you'll always have to worry about, but I'm finding that brushing up on my understanding of table calculations and how that works with the script is something that that has become a little bit of importance if I'm going to be using that quite a bit. So that's Python in Tableau. You can read more about it, you can check it out, you can try it out for yourself. I'm excited because I think there's a lot that you can do with that, a lot of power with using Python. But there are other features that are really cool, and some of them are maybe even more exciting to you if you don't plan on doing a lot of calculations or heavy complex statistical stuff with Python. Then maybe you're more excited about something like this. What if you're building out just a relatively simple view like this? And I've built a fair number of these in my life, where I have maybe certain rows of data, maybe certain categories and subcategories of data, and I want to be able just to look at multiple metrics at the same time. So here maybe I want to look at my categories and subcategories, and I want to be able to look at sales, but I also want to be able to look at profit, and I also want to be able to look at the discount and maybe even quantity that were sold. And a text table isn't very exciting. It isn't necessarily visually easy to see. It's great if I need to know the exact value of something, I can look it up. But sometimes I'll try to help it a little bit by adding another visual element like color. So if I put that measure values there on color and then even change the mark type to square, now I get a highlight table. And that helps me see certain things. It helps me see large values and small values. But the problem is, when I'm looking at multiple different measures, there are some measures that vastly outweigh the other ones. So sales here is in hundreds of thousands. Profit is in tens of thousands. That even goes negative at times. But discount is a percentage, so it's 0 to 1. And so it gets washed out because there's nothing that even comes close to approaching 100,000 or more. And when I look at the scale over here on my legend of measure values, I see that, yeah, I'm going from negative 17,000 up to 330,000. So anything that's kind of a 0 to 1 value or even just a low hundreds or low thousands value, I'm not going to actually see anything that's visually helpful when I just have one color legend. But in Tableau 10.2, I have the ability to come up with multiple color legends when I'm using measure values and measure names. So I can take the field here, measure values, that's on color, and on the drop-down, I have an option to use separate legends. When I do that, notice that I get a legend for each measure. So sometimes you'll hear this feature called legends per measure. I can get one legend for each measure, a legend for profit, legend for sales, legend for discount. And this starts to be really nice because now I can start to see, oh, there's my high discount. There's my low discounts. They start to really pop out. And I can start to do something like this, where I take each legend and edit them separately so that I give each one maybe a different color scheme. So profit is maybe a gray color scheme, and sales, if I edit that one, maybe it's green. Discount is maybe a purple. And what I can start to do is I can start to get a visualization here that helps me see each one of my measures, and I can start to see some of the relationships. This is interesting. I've got binders that have high profit, high sales, high discounts, and high quantities. But I've got some other things where I've got high sales, but maybe not quite as high in the quantity and the profit or the discount. So this is a really nice feature, and it opens up some possibilities when you're visualizing multiple metrics per category in your data. Another thing that I really like about Tableau 10.2 is this new feature called Table Calc Assistance. So imagine if you have a view like this. Maybe I'm looking at profit over time. So we'll put order date out there, and year is great, quarter is okay, but I think I'm going to go to the month level and get rid of quarter, and then maybe even break this up by segment. So I've got a nice view here that just shows me profit over time for each segment, and broken out by year and then month within the year. And what I'm really interested in is not just what was the profit on a given month, but what was our running sum of profit, or what was our running total of profit. So on the drop-down, that's pretty easy to get to, and even previous versions of Tableau for a long time have made this pretty easy. Quick table calculation, running total. And what it's doing is it's just building out the running total of profit over time, and it keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and that's great if that's what I really want. But maybe what I really want is to be able to look at the running total of profit, but I want it to restart every year. So I want to see my running sum of profit for that year, and then the next year restart. And that gets to be a little bit more complex, and you're going to have cases where the table calculations maybe even get really complex, and they can be hard to figure out at times. But Tableau has made it a lot easier to figure out now, because now if I go to Edit Table Calculation, what Tableau does, when it brings up the Edit Table Calculation dialog, it also shows me table calculation assistance right in the view. And that's, I can toggle that on and off using a checkbox here. But if it's on, what it does is a couple of things. For one thing, it highlights what the partition of the data is. So here, it's set to compute using table across, and it says, okay, so it's going to be within each segment across the table, starting at 1, which didn't quite get a label, but 2 did, and 3 did, 4 missed its label, 5. So it's going to label what it can, but it's going to show you the order. So it shows me that it's starting at 1 and then going across, building up all the way until I get to 48 here. And that helps me see where the calculations are taking place and what order they're taking place. So when it's the running sum of profit, it's adding it up across the table for each segment. And you can see if I change this, if I say, okay, table down, now it highlights the first month, January, and it says, here's the order. It's going to start here at the top of the table and go down the table. So it's really kind of nice. I can start to see exactly how it's working and exactly the order of the table calculation. And then, if I want to get to my goal of having the running sum of profit for each year and then restarting, I might come here to specific dimensions, and instead of segment, I really don't want that. What I really probably want to do is do it for each month. And when I check that and I leave the other two unchecked, those two, segment and year, become the partition. So within each segment and year combination, the running sum computes along this order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then in the next partition, it starts over and rebuilds more and more all the way across the table, but partitioned for each segment, for each year. And this starts to be exactly what I want. When I close the table calculation dialog box, I see the view exactly the way that I wanted to see it. And in fact, I can do something kind of cool with this view. If I take the sum of profit and hold down on Control, I can copy that over to the label. But instead of seeing the label for everything, maybe just on the highlighted marks. And what's going to get highlighted? Well, I can control that up here. I can say, let's highlight the month. It's already checked, which is great, but if it wasn't, I could check it right there. And now when I select a given month, I get to see what the running profit was, what the profit year-to-date was at that point, but I get to see it within every segment and every year, which is really kind of nice because now I can compare those sorts of things. So there's June, there's December for every year, for every segment. All kinds of fun things that you could do with this kind of a view, all kinds of interesting analysis. So the next time someone says they want year-to-date and year-over-year, you might think of a view like this, which is a lot more visual and interactive, but maybe a lot more intuitive and a lot easier to understand than just a simple table of numbers. That's Table Calc Assistance. Pretty helpful overall. Another thing that I really like is that Tableau continues to build out features that they have had previously, but they make it even easier to use, and they continue to extend the capabilities. So things like union and join, those have been there for quite a while. You could union files together, starting with Tableau 10. Actually, even before that, Tableau 9.3. But they've continued to build out that functionality, and cross-database joins have been there for a couple of different iterations, but there are some new capabilities that we'll take a look at with both of these, union and join. So in fact, what I'm going to do is connect to a new data source, and I'm going to use a SQL Server. So a lot of you may use various relational databases, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle. You can use all kinds of different relational databases. Now, Tableau has allowed you to union together files for a couple of different versions, but previously, if you wanted to if you wanted to union together tables within a database, you'd have to use your own custom SQL statement to do that. So I could use a custom SQL here, or maybe I could write my own view or my own stored procedure or something like that that would do that union. But sometimes that's not an easy option. Maybe it's not even an option at all if you don't have the security permissions to create a view. Or sometimes you may have so many tables that you need to union together that it just may be very tedious and time-consuming to do that. I've worked with databases where I have 50 different tables, all the same schema. I want to union them together. I have no idea why the database was constructed that way, but it was. And in fact, here's an example. In this case, only two tables, so not quite as bad. But it's some real estate data, so I have some houses, but each table is a different city. So I have some houses in Mansfield, some houses in Midlothian, and you could imagine the database might even have more than that. And if I look at the data, it's great. I've got things like the address, the city, the state, the MLS number, different aspects of the house itself that I might want to evaluate. But each table contains a different city. Well, Tableau now has the ability, with the relational databases, with some of them, to give you the ability to union these together very easily. So just like you would with a flat file or an Excel file, now just drag and drop and you have your union. And so I could union a bunch of tables together all at once and come up with something like this. And Tableau does exactly what you'd expect in terms of giving you the table name, so I know exactly which table the data came from. If I scroll down, there's my other table, and it's put them together. It's matched up columns based on name and type, and they don't even have to exactly match. It'll work, and you have your merge functions just like you would expect before. So this makes life a lot easier, and then when I come to use this data, I'm going to find that I can do all kinds of fun things. I can maybe look at the price and look at the size of the house, how big it is, and let's pull in the MLS number here just so we can get our view of correlation between the size of the house in terms of square feet and the list price, and I can see, yeah, there probably is a correlation as houses get bigger, they get more expensive. There might be some that might be a good deal to buy, or maybe there's significant work that needs to be done on the house. Who knows? But I could do that kind of research based on this analysis. So if you work with real estate data, there's all kinds of fun things that you can do with it. But one thing that would be really fun to do at this point is to actually map where these houses are. And I do have a couple of geographic fields. I have city and state, and Tableau has recognized those and even put them together as a hierarchy for me, which is really pretty cool that it would do that. And I could map those. But if you remember from the data, I only have 2 different cities. So if I were to map it, I'd just see two different points on the map, and that's not very helpful. What I really want to do is I want to map the street addresses of these houses. Well, for that, I'm not going to be able to use the built-in latitude and longitude, but if I have the data, I can use it. And what I've always done in previous versions of Tableau, at least since I've been able to, with the cross-database joins, is I can come in here and just add a new data connection within this source. And I'll say Excel in this case. And I've got a geocoding data source that gives me a list of all of the addresses and latitude and longitude, and even a date of survey there. So I'll select that one. And when I look at it, I see that I'm not getting any matches on the data. I come in here and I look and I say, well, it's trying to match on address. That's kind of what I would have wanted to do. So maybe a left join, which gives me everything from my union of tables, but I'm not getting a match over here for anything. Everything's null. And if I look at the data here from my Excel file, now I start to see why I'm not getting a match. It's because in the Excel file, address is everything. Street address, city, and state. But when I look at the data as it is in SQL Server, it's street address is one thing, city is another thing, state is another field, so they're all separate, and that's why it's not finding any matches. Now, in previous versions of Tableau, I'd kind of be stuck right here. I'd have to figure out some way of manipulating the data outside of Tableau to get it to join together, but not in Tableau 10.2. In 10.2, I'm going to come here to the join, and instead of joining address to address, what I can do instead is I can create what's called a join calculation. So if I do that, I'm going to do it here on the left-hand side. So I'll start with the address, but I just want to concatenate these things together. So I want a space, and then the city, and then a comma, space, and then the state. And when I do that, I see that the calculation is valid, and I see that I can use almost anything that I would normally be able to use in Tableau. And I hit apply. Now I see Tableau has joined those things together correctly. I'll say OK. And if I were to scroll down, I'd see everything found a match, which is great. And that's exactly what I want. I now have the latitude and the longitude, and I have the date of survey, but when I look at that, I see that I've got another problem. I've got some really interesting formatting issues going on here, which is not too uncommon with Excel and dates. Most of the time, though, it's not quite this bad. This is a mixture of different formats for dates. And so Tableau looked at that and said, well, that's a string field. I look at that and say, no, that's a mixture of different date formats. And what I would have done in previous versions of Tableau is gotten frustrated and realized I'm going to have to build a complex calculation to deal with this, because even though I have things like DateParse that I can use to parse out a string and turn it into a date, with this many date formats, it's going to be a complex calculation to figure out which format is it using, and then I'm going to have to build out some sort of an if statement. It would be a mess. I wouldn't want to do it. But here in Tableau 10.2, it's as easy as coming here to the data type and telling Tableau, let's treat this as a date. And Tableau automatically parses all of those different formats and gives me a nice date value that I'm going to be able to use in my visualization. So Tableau knows all of the different standard date formats, and it's able to automatically determine the value based on a string, even if you have a mixture of different formats. So Tableau did that. It did it really well. Lots of different date formats, but it found each one of them. And at this point, I can come in here, and I've got a nice data source, which I might rename it, just call it houses. But you can see I've got my address field, my date of survey field, which it's recognized as a date. I've also got my latitude and longitude automatically, or they're from the data source itself. So this should be, if I were to look at this, and if I were to bring in the address itself and split that out, I should actually get a mark for each house based on its actual latitude and longitude. And then from the map layers, I could do things like add streets and highways and maybe county and state borders, just to give me a little bit more context of where these things are exactly located. But all kinds of things that you can do with Tableau, and it continues to grow in its capabilities of data integration and data preparation. So things that I used to have to do outside of Tableau, I can do right here in Tableau, and it keeps me in the flow of getting to my data and doing the analysis, and it's just becoming easier and easier. In fact, if you were at conference, Tableau demonstrated a new product offering that's coming out at some point, which they've codenamed Maestro. And it takes the data preparation that we just looked at that's built in Tableau here, and it takes it to the next level. So I expect that it will be even more fully featured. But Tableau Desktop will continue to grow in its feature list as well, and everything just makes it a lot easier to get to my data and do my analysis of the data, and then to visualize it and present it to other people so that they can see it. And so I'm really enjoying it, and I know that you will as well. But sometimes after I've gone through the data preparation and I've got a nice data source like this called houses, sometimes I need to take that data. So I've got everything I want. I've got my latitude and longitude. I've got it joined in with a lot of the other real estate features here. I've got my dates cleaned up, and I've done all of that in Tableau. But sometimes I need to take that data and I need to ship it off to some other process to do something else or do some other kind of cleansing, and then maybe I'll bring it back to Tableau. But I need to get that data, and I need to have it outside of Tableau. And how do I do that? Well, in previous versions of Tableau, I might have tried to select the marks and then gone to view data and pulled that data out and copied it. It worked, or I could export it to a crosstab or something like that. It all worked, but it wasn't very easy or intuitive or seamless. Here in Tableau 10.2, all I have to do is just right-click the data source and say Export Data to CSV. At that point, I save it wherever I want. And now, once I open it, if I can find it, here it is. Now I've got a nice comma-separated values list of all of my data. So it opens up really nicely in Excel, and I can do whatever I want with this. I can ship it off to another process, another department, whatever I need to do. And I've got everything that I could want that's already been cleaned up, like the latitude and longitude. I've got my dates. They're all a nice standard format now. So that's made it really nice and easy, not only to prepare my data for analysis in Tableau, but then to export it and do other things with it as well. And so that is an overview of what's new in Tableau 10.2. You'll start to see other features that I haven't covered. We didn't even look at Tableau Server, and there's a whole new set of features there. There are all kinds of little features that you'll start to see, like when you open up a workbook that was created in a previous version, instead of just telling you, hey, this was a previous version and it's going to be updated, the dialog box actually tells you what version it used to be and what version it's going to be updated to. So little things like that make life easier, and then some of these big features that we've looked at that really change the game in terms of working with your data and doing analysis with your data. And then Tableau is kind of like Star Wars. That is, they will release one version, in this case 10.2, but at the same time, they will give you a preview of the next version. So Tableau 10.3 is already in beta. And Tableau 10.3 has a lot of new features that you can look at. But one of them that I'm kind of excited about, we saw Tableau 10.2 introduce Spatial Files. Tableau 10.3 introduces PDFs. So, for example, I have a PDF here from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and it lists out America's wars. But what was really interesting to me here at the bottom, it has a table of wars and who's still receiving benefits based on the veterans and the dependents of those veterans. And this was really fascinating to me. It's from the Civil War. There's still one child receiving benefits. That's incredible. From the Spanish-American War, there's still 46 children, 42 surviving spouses. And this is as of May last year, but that's just amazing that there are still people receiving benefits that far ago. But this table is in a PDF file, and if I wanted to grab a table from a PDF file and do analysis, that's kind of hard. Sometimes I can, maybe I can select and copy and then paste it somewhere. But here, in fact, if I copy that text and then paste it, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to treat that as a table of data. So that's not going to work here. Maybe I'd have to turn to some third-party tool, but not anymore. Now, directly from Tableau, I select PDF file, and I go and find that file. And Tableau is going to say, okay, we'll scan it for tables. What do you want to do? I'm going to say, well, let's just look for that table on the second page. Say okay. And Tableau is going to scan through that, and it's going to find everything that might be a table of data. In this case, I think it's the first one. We can double check. Yeah, there it is. And you can see it's not perfect. It doesn't always get everything here. It's got some columns, and so if I took this table, I'm going to have to do a little bit of work here in Tableau to maybe rename some of these, and then maybe filter out some of the null fields. But very quickly, I can get to that data in that PDF. So I'm excited about that feature. There are other new features that I'll be exploring, and at some point I'll have a webinar that we can dive into the new features of Tableau 10.3, and especially as it gets closer to release, you'll be excited about using it as well. So at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up for questions. We've got a couple of minutes, and I see a couple of questions already. And the first one I see is, did anyone else lose sound? About 15 minutes ago, so I hope not. Sorry about that. And I hope everybody else could hear. The next question, is there a way that Tableau can take a street name in a city and show the outline of the street that I want to highlight? I have made a view like that before, and what I had to do on that was basically create a shape file of the street itself. So for every street, it had a polygon or shape file, and so you would have to have the data, but that is possible. And then a follow-up on that was, for example, a certain band of home builders built houses on a certain street, and I want to see that street, and not particularly all the houses on that street. So yeah, if you were able to get the data that could draw the polygon or the shape of that street, then absolutely you could match that up in Tableau and highlight that based on the street name or some ID. And then one last question, will this presentation be available for download or viewing later? Absolutely. And so this is a repeat. I'm not sure which version will actually make it to the download. But what I would say is this: there are a couple of different Twitter accounts to follow. So one is mine, and what I'll do is once it's out there, I'll probably I'll definitely try to tweet that out to say where it is. It'll be on YouTube. The other is Teknion, which hosts these webinars. So follow either or both of those, and you'll be alerted to when these webinars are made available for viewing on YouTube. And then you can also look if you go to YouTube, you could search for Teknion Data Solutions and actually subscribe to the channel there. So that would be another possibility. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure, as always, to talk with you today about Tableau, and I continue to look forward to each one of these. I'm excited about Tableau, and I know that many of you are as well. So until next time, vislong, and prosper.